Hi, everybody. I'm Laura,
And I'm Allison.
and this is the Earp Top 5 podcast for freedom.
On this episode, we're going to be talking about the top 5 moments of BBD scientist turned director, Jeremy Chetri.
This is going to be a good one. I feel it in my groin.
Hey, that's my line, you gorgeous idiot.
Varun, thanks for joining us.
What's going on?
Welcome to the podcast, Varun.
I can't believe it. I made it. Top 5.
Yeah.
This is my top 5 favorite podcast.
Whoa. Wonderful. That's something to be said, huh?
Well, I've only been on 5.
Oh.
So it literally is your top 5.
Well, before we get started into the top 5, why don't you tell us? Because we've seen panels from cons and things like that, but I don't think we've ever heard kind of your origin story of how you came to play Jeremy. You want to just give us a little brief thing about how you heard about the show, the character, that kind of breakdown?
Sure, yeah, that's true. I guess I never really talked about it.
We dive deep here. We go deep.
I know, amazing. It's true. Back in, I guess, 2017, I want to say, or 2016, end of 2016, I auditioned for Winona, but it was actually under fake sides. Sides are what you use to audition with. They're just the script. That's what we call them.
Yeah.
And so I went into the audition kind of not knowing what the plot was, not knowing who the characters were. But the character they described as Jeremy, it was another code name at the time. I can't recall. He was just like hugely anal and neurotic about his workspace, and he didn't like people impeding on it. And so it was just this dynamic with what was now the Winona character. And he was just being like kind of a thorn in her side. He was being really annoying, or what we know is Jeremy to be kind of just doesn't know when he's overstepping. And so even then it was like I was having fun with that dynamic. I remember that Emily in the description of it, I assume she wrote it because it was very specific, said like comedic actors a must, like timing is necessary. So I did my first take and I like felt a bit uneasy and I was like, please, could I redo that? I really just want to nail this. And so I did the second one and I felt really good. And then I didn't really hear back about it for a month. And so I decided to go like travel to Los Angeles. I was looking for a manager at the time, kind of just existing on very little money. I think I was down to my last dollar, as is the tale for most actors. And I was just in my Airbnb and my friend was crashing with me as well. And I get a call in the morning, super hungover from a night of partying. And I just get a voicemail saying, "Oh, hey, Varun, could you call me back? I have some good news. You might need to fly out soon." I'm like, "Oh, okay, whatever. What's this?" I call it. My agent's like, "Oh, yeah, that audition you went for a month ago. Well, they want to book you. Could you fly out on Monday?" And I'm like, "I didn't bring any winter clothing. Will they provide that for me?" And yes. And so I flew out there. They were so generous to me. I had like a t-shirt and like shorts, and they gave me all these pants and clothed me in Canadian weather. And I was just off to the races. Like the next day I was filming as Jeremy, and it was a complete whirlwind. Like on the plane ride, I watched some Winona, but at the same time, I was like a bit confused by the show because I didn't understand like genre TV. Like I never experienced Buffy or any of these shows before. So I was like, okay, so the tone is so hard for me to grasp. Like, I hope I figure this out. So when I got there to set, it was an intimidating experience because I kind of was referencing what I was doing in my audition previously, but I don't know really the tone of the show. As soon as I did my first scene though with Melanie, I believe it was with Melanie, it was in her bathrobe when when I say I have an inverted nipple. And it was a bit of tweaking because the director was just like, play it more nervous, be more stumbly, like play your status much lower. Cause there was just kind of fine tuning what Jeremy is. And then there was the sweet spot that Mel and I hit. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is Jeremy. And then I was kind of off to the races from there.
That seems to be the show's MO, because if I recall correctly, Kat's thing was like she got Nicole and she had to fly out immediately as well, get her hair dyed, and she was on set the next day. So So listen, I guess, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like, don't give the actors any time to prepare, right?
Pretty much.
Just
I mean,
drop them in the deep end.
This is the nature of film in general. Like even that role I was telling you about in Cayman Islands, I got the call and then a week later it's like, do you have your passport? You have to leave. So it's just like, you got to be ready as an actor to kind of come up with something pretty last minute and hope for the best.
Yeah. Just we're going to get into it, but just on an aside note, do you prefer filming locally in Toronto, or do you like going out of like city, state, country?
I really prefer filming in Canada. Like, I've given the United States a lot of chances, but I think I just enjoy kind of the Canadian culture and homegrown quality of our filmmaking. It always feels a bit more indie, which is easier for me to grasp because you have more creative control. And that's what I loved about Wynonna Earp, is never larger than life. Like it was always this intimate group of people trying to make a show. And I think I just resonate with that kind of filmmaking more than things that are like really high budget and hard to navigate through.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what you're saying is we're never going to see you in the new Iron Man suit, right?
I mean, if they pay me, sure, I'll do a lot of things for the cash. But
you mean we're not going to get you and Tim as Batman and Robin?
Yeah.
My preference is Canadian things because we just get to film more in a day too. Like we're very ambitious Canadian productions, like 12 pages in a day. We have 12 hours to film it. It's a difficult thing, but it's more fun as an actor, I'll say.
It's more intimate, more family. And I think that's a good segue into our kind of first top moment. And Allison and I have the same one, and that's really Jeremy's introduction. I would just say that I enjoyed his introduction because he immediately became part of the group. Like he was a no questions asked kind of guy. Wynonna yelled out to him, "Ride or die, dude," and he jumped on that elevator. And it was just him being a part of this group. And Allison, what do you want to say about that first introduction of Jeremy?
Yeah, kind of the same thing. I mean, like with the show like this, we went a whole season, we got to know these characters, and then you get to a season 2. And I think as an actor, you can probably, explain a little bit what this is like. But I imagine it's kind of like the same for fans too. You're watching a show and you have these new characters and you're like, okay, we got to learn to love these new characters. Like, like, what are we going to get from them? How are they going to blend in to the show? And as an actor, I'm sure that's sort of the same thing where you're coming into this show. But just like Laura said, I mean, Jeremy he clicked so well with Waverly in that scene where he's in the lab and they're talking about the monsters and she's pretending to be British. And I think
flirting with him.
Yeah. And like flirting and like pretending all these things. And she even tries to hit him over the head. And he's like, "You can't bleed in here," which is just a hilarious line because, the show is so filled with monsters that of course he would be in a lab that you couldn't bleed in, So I guess one of the questions I have for you, Varun, is like, just as Jeremy became ride or die immediately, how long do you think it took you to sort of be ride or die with this show? Like, when did you know that this was going to be something that you were going to be, 100% on board with?
It was a process. I'll say like it took me a while to feel like I integrated in the show. I understood the show. Like maybe why it's on my top 5 list, but like the alternate universe Jeremy, like that towards the end of Wynonna Earp, I finally felt like I was understanding and part of Wynonna Earp. Like not only my friendships with the cast deepened, but just my understanding of my character in the show, it just made more sense to me, because it's a shit show. You got to keep up, and it's in more ways than one. So you gotta adapt. And finally, I like hit this point where I understood in the alternate universe. It's just like, oh, it makes so much sense. Like this is who this character is. This is his dynamics relative to Nicole, relative to Waverly, to Wynonna. Like everything finally clicked. And so, yeah, it took me a while to adapt. That being said, everyone was super friendly. Dom and Tim off the bat, like, were great people to hang out with. And then Tim became one of my closest friends. Like he was the one who took me to breakfast every day. He had someone to hang out with, and just chop it up. And that friendship just still continues to this day. And maybe it's one of my most valued things from doing the show is being friends with him.
Yeah. Do you think, just to get back to the first Jeremy moment for a second, like, do you think Jeremy himself just wanted, because he's alone in that lab, and then this group of people come in and he jumps at the chance to like kind of be a part of this group? Do you think that's why he was so eager? And then like later on in kind of the episodes and things like that, he even like offers to be the Manny to the baby because just to be needed, just to like kind of try to stick around. Do you think that's something that he was yearning for?
I think so. I definitely think so. I think the initial ride or die response though is survival. Like I don't know if he identifies any of these people as his friend initially. Like I even kind of played that like that as well. It's like, I have no choice because the Black Badge is going to think I betrayed them. Mm-hmm. And also in my head, I think Jeremy's often on thin ice because him and Dolls always struck me as outsiders within the organization. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like, yeah, I don't know if he necessarily was seeking friends, but it was happy that he got it. I think he was seeking friends, but I don't think he saw these people as friends initially.
Well, yeah, I mean, they came into his lab and started fighting people. I'm sure he was like, what have I gotten myself into?
100%. Yeah. It's but I think after meeting Waverly, and even Waverly in the next episode tries to include Jeremy, and then Wynona's like, oh, Locato's lapdog, like she's already trying to integrate him. And I think maybe that friendship with Jeremy's like, oh, maybe these are nice people and actually care about me. Like that starts to enter maybe as the episodes progress.
Yeah. It did take a while for Wynonna to warm up to him. So what is one of your moments? You could either go chronologically or just the more important ones.
I guess so. Chronologically, sure. Maybe getting attached to the boys is my first real like, oh my God, this is filmmaking and it's ridiculous and it's so fun because I've never been on a wire before. And of course there's the camaraderie amongst the boys. Like we all are trying to one up each other, and it was just such a great dynamic between Tim, Shamir, and I. Like we just had a lot of fun and a lot of jokes. And you never really get that from the episodes where they divide the groups and they go on their adventures. And it was just a very funny episode in its entirety. Like Drunk Nicole gets introduced, and how the stories interweave in that way are just so good. And I think what stood out to it being special had nothing to do with filming it. It was getting to watch it at Comic-Con with a group of Earpers. Like that was one of our events for the day. It's like Earpers get to watch that episode with us because it was airing and we were live tweeting it. And so as a cast, as the Earpers, we all got to participate in this. We were all sitting in this kind of fancy room watching it together. And I just felt so good watching the show with the fans because as an actor, I never really got to experience that till that moment. And so that episode always stood out to me as like just one of my favorite things to not only be a part of, but to watch.
So what is it like actually being on the wire when you're hooked to it and they're saying you're going to get slung up to the ceiling or like
a lot of wedgies?
Yeah. I mean, you're leave a bit bruised, honestly. There's like 2 people per person pulling the wire, and it's kind of on a pulley harness system. So it's not like dangerous. Like you're always secure, like it'll stop itself. You won't get hurt, but it's just like disorienting being flown around, And I remember feeling really bad because I jumped on Tim, who crushed Shamir, and poor Tim has a bad back and he was like yelling in pain. And I was like, okay, maybe I gotta be more safe about this because you could have way too much fun being a kid and you forget that some people might get injured.
Yeah. My favorite part of that was when Doc tucked Jeremy in at the end there. That was a cute moment.
Yeah. That was a cute moment. Totally. I always wondered because you never got to know like what Doc thought of Jeremy's crush. Like he always just never says anything. You know what I mean? And I just love that. Like what is going on in Doc's head about this crush?
That kind of makes it funnier though, that Doc never really acknowledges it. It just became part of their relationship and friendship. Like it's
Absolutely.
never really
he never acknowledged the mustache either. He never acknowledged it existed until it was gone. And then he's like, is that why you shaved your mustache? And it was like, oh my God.
He was silently proud, I think, of the mustache. He didn't want to say anything about it out loud. He wanted to just silently admire.
Yeah, I hope so.
All right, Laura, what's a moment you want to talk about?
I'm gonna go 212. I'm gonna go with the moment that Jeremy, Doc, and Bobo are at the mine shaft opening. And it stuck out to me because here you have Jeremy, who's not the toughest guy, I would say. And yet he goes to Doc and tells him that he needs to go meet the baby and everything. And then Jeremy's the one that stays with a gun to Bobo. Like, if it was me and like this is the, I guess, most powerful revenant or whatever, like bad guy, and I was Jeremy, not the toughest guy, like not the, for lack of a better term, he was a wimp. Let's call a spade a spade. And yet he was just like, no. These are my people now. Don't even think about it. You're not going to go after them. I have my plastic gun. You can't do anything about it. And that's that. So like, what was that like to just have Jeremy kind of come into his power almost in that scene and that kind of space?
Oh my God. It was like a perfect storm because like obviously that was I think my last day or might have got close to my last day. So filming with Tim. And then it's the first time I met Mikey, who gets to play Bobo. And Bobo is such a heavily mythicized character and such a good villain. And so to pit Jeremy, such a different personality against such an intimidating force, Varun even felt intimidated acting with Mikey Eklund because he's all commitment, and I remember distinctly when we were rehearsing it, he punches through a board in the mine shaft and I accidentally like started early and he punched through it and they had to reset. And then he like let out a noise of anger. And I like turned to our third assistant director, Brock. And I was like, oh my God, is he actually mad? Like, I was like so terrified genuinely of Mikey Eklund. So like a lot of what you see there is like, I'm intimidated by the actor as well as Jeremy being intimidated by Bobo. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like Jeremy was badass because he made his own gun that he built it out after Doc. That's what the prop guy said. He like wanted to model it after Doc's pistols. So that's why Jeremy took inspiration from it.
Back in the day, I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s. My brother had this like laser tag set and the gun looked exactly like this thing from like a laser tag set that my brother had that he never would let me play with. So I was like, oh, that's a cool gun. Did Mikey did he lick you? I think that's how he shows affection. Did he?
I was not licked, but Tim was licked many a times during those takes.
Yeah.
I don't know. Bobo likes to lick things, licking shoes, licking ears. He licked his eye, I think.
Yeah.
That would not have been COVID safe had you been filming.
No, definitely not.
If Mikey came back for 4B, probably half of the stuff that he would do in character would not be COVID safe.
No, most definitely not.
Well, I like that you kind of brought up this moment, Laura, because one of my top moments is the Jeremy backstory. And in that moment, when they're fighting at Bobo, we kind of learn a little bit about it because Jeremy makes this gun of plastic so that Bobo can't use it against him, right? But Bobo threatens Jeremy by remarking that he has a lot of metal in his body. And at that moment, we kind of learn that it's the result of the car accident from when Jeremy was younger. And so we get a little bit of the backstory there. And then in 308, we learn that he had actually been stuck in the car with the body of his dead mother for 3 days. And now he can sense when his friends are super scared. So when you're reading the script, I mean, you come on as a character, and I'm sure that you create stories in your head to kind of give you something to play with. But when you read these backstories on the scripts, what's it like learning about that and his apparent superpower? Because like Laura mentioned, when he's like, you've got to go see the baby or Wayhot's waiting for you or something, we learn that he like, how did Jeremy sense that? And then we kind of learn a little bit about his superpower. But what is it like for you to read this on the script? And is there anything that really surprised you about his kind of power?
Yeah, I mean, the power in general surprised me. I think it wasn't apparent until 12, and I talked to Emily about it. And so it was originally that power was, I think, another series that Emily was writing with a character who had this empathetic, not crotch power, but empathetic power due to them being stuck with their mother for 3 days in a car accident. And but she was like, I love the story so much and I didn't want to save it for like another show. I wanted to save it. I wanted to use it on Jeremy because I think it like fits the framework of what Jeremy is, which is like a really kind and ethical person. And so by getting that on, you kind of notice is like, oh yeah, he's just intuitive in an empathetic way. Like he understands despite not understanding, you know? And yeah, it was interesting to play with that idea. And as an actor, I don't really take the powers as like, okay, how does that make sense? Like, how did he get the powers from sitting in a car with his mom? Did someone endow him with a blah, blah? I just need to know that he has powers, you know? And that's all you really need to know about it, because the writer will come up with any way that he got the powers as long as he has them. And so after knowing that in season 3 and 4, it made me understand like, oh, Jeremy just looks at people with empathy. And like, that's going to be my force from now on, of like, he understands people's pain and he understands people's suffering more than how the powers work or not. And yeah, it just like deepened my understanding of how Jeremy's personality works in general. Because then I picture that like his memory is so good, he probably relives that moment constantly, you know? And so that must translate into his powers and feelings about others all the time.
What's another moment of yours, Varun?
I put when Jeremy meets Robin.
Okay.
And the murder tree. I loved that episode because I loved the banter between Justin Kelly and myself. Like that was one of my funnest days on that show because it was just such well-written comedy and back and forth, and Justin and I loved our chemistry. So it was so satisfying to do those moments. And it was nice to like have a boyfriend. Like the potential to have a relationship was so meaningful as I understood what representation actually meant. You know, it's so crazy to me because I feel like Winona was so ahead of its time with all these kind of things. And it taught me so much about the meaning of representation and how to play it honestly and how important it is to do so, because it's a responsibility thing. And previously, I think I was dismissive of those ideas because I never really saw myself represented. And then I like internalized that as, you know, the norm until I'm like, oh no, that's unfair and should be changed. And it was through doing the show that I learned that. So I don't know, it meant a lot to me to have those kind of scenes with Justin. And yeah, it was just like such great moments.
Did you and Justin ever have like a screen test or anything like that? Or did you guys meet prior to him being cast?
No, we never had a screen test or anything. I think Emily just has a good intuition of who fits her characters or not, because she gets the final say. And I think she had worked with Justin actually on Degrassi, so she knew that he was a great guy. That's all that Emily wants, honestly, on the show is just good people, and then good actors second.
Yeah. When did you actually find out that that's a storyline that they were going to hit on? Did you know before the season? Did they tell you beforehand, or was it just...
It was at Comic-Con. Emily was talking to me about it, of like, hey, I want to give Jeremy a boyfriend. And I was like, okay, this is like great. Because she wanted to make it distinct from Way Hot, like more like awkward, perhaps less like just more of a slow burn in terms of passion and love. And like maybe a different in to like how kind of awkward people like each other, you know, which is always its different courting process. That was my favorite part with Justin, is like, being best friends with Justin is like how Jeremy would love his partner, you know, as a friend. Like, and that was so nice to play with Justin. Like, I'm like, these guys are buddies as well as lovers. Like, this is super fun to play that aspect.
Yeah, my favorite is when they high five at the end of 3 at the table, and they're just like, "Yeah, we both got." But it's funny because Emily does joke about Canada only having like 11 actors or whatever the case may be. The acting pool is small in Canada, but it's not really. But that's her kind of joke. And to know that you and Justin actually didn't know each other, had never met before, and to have this kind of like immediate camaraderie and chemistry, I think it's a testament to, like you said, how she just knows how to fit people together.
She knows how to mix and match groups too. Like, I'm always impressed that every character, when they're in a scene together, it's such a distinct energy. it leaves you
Yeah.
wanting more of like, oh, how far, like, what's that dynamic like? Every scene I got to do with Winona always felt like this unique thing separate from other characters.
Allison, what's another moment from you?
So I want to go back to 204. It's like right after Jeremy joins the team and he's working in purgatory now because Black Badge has him, down in purgatory now. And it's the episode with the demon Jackson, who, for those that can't remember, he's the one with the weird bone hand. That's how I remember him.
The one that chops off Waverly's hand.
Yeah. And it's the moment where he comes looking for the briefcase that Winona has stolen and they're kind of hiding. And Jeremy has apparently gone out for coffee and on the way has apparently stumbled into Jackson. And so Jackson brings him to Shorty's and says, if you don't give me the briefcase, Winona, I will kill him. And Winona's like, he's the new guy, last one in, first one out. And he's like, what? And Winona says, loosen up. And he says, I'm about to poop my pants. And, she's like, not that loose. And, for him to he's a new guy on the team. He's trying to find his place. And then there's this person who's like, we're okay with sacrificing him. We're okay. But after a bit of time, Winona does end up setting the briefcase down to essentially save Jeremy from Jackson. But turns out Dolls comes bursting out, all dragon force, to save them all anyways. And he, dragon blows this guy full of fire and they're all saved. But I love that moment just because it's kind of the first time that Winona sort of acknowledges that he's actually a part of the team. And because she's actually willing to say, okay, I'll put this down if you let him go. And so, Varun, do you think Jeremy had to prove himself as part of the Earp squad? I mean, the Earps have a lot of enemies, but it also seems that they accepted you pretty quickly as Jeremy. So how do you think that Jeremy was able to prove himself as part of the squad?
I mean, I think it was we don't get to see the time as it jumps, but I think it was over a couple months of between episode 1 to episode 4 of he has to constantly put in the work. Because you even see in episode 3 when he's explaining the trophy, how little she trusts him.
Mm-hmm.
But when finally push comes to shove, I think after a couple of months, she was like, okay, maybe this guy is he's on the level. And when I save her from her burning shirt, I think that just confirms that I have their best interest at heart, or I'm a good person fundamentally. And also, inserting my relationship to Dolls, which pre-exists all of them, I care about Dolls in my own unique way. And I think she finally sees that. And it's okay, if he can be friends with my friends, maybe he's on the level. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of how the vetting worked. She saw how I interacted with everybody else and ultimately decided I was okay.
That feels like an accurate way of Winona to judge friendships. She kind of looks at the people around her and she's like, Waverly, you like him? Okay. Dolls, you're good? Okay. She kind of just goes through to see what everybody else feels about him before she makes her own choice.
Because you notice Winona didn't warm up to Nicole right away either. It took them a while to become friends, and to Doc, to anybody, it takes her a long time to warm up. And I think she has to see the people closest to her, the people who she's interacting with. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that kind of leads into my moment where it kind of backtracked a little bit. And it's from 302 when Jeremy has to keep Dolls' secret that there is something wrong with him, that he's sick. And the fallout of that, in terms of when he does die, Winona blames Jeremy for not saying anything. And pretty much Jeremy becomes kind of persona non grata within the group again. And he just made all of this headway, and then it goes to shit a little bit. Where do you think Jeremy's loyalties lie there? Did they lie with Dolls, or did they lie with this new group? And obviously he chose to keep Dolls a secret over the new group. But do you think he had he obviously had reservations? Did he have guilt after what happened to Dolls?
Yeah. I think we never really got to explore too deeply Jeremy and Dolls' relationship, but I like to assume it was quite a brotherly. I think even throughout his years at Black Badge, Dolls always had an eye out for Jeremy. And I think Jeremy felt like he owed Dolls that secret. Like it wasn't even a dividing between friend group or anything. It was paying history. It's like due. Like Dolls always helped out Jeremy. And he implied in one of the lines that he was helping find out what happened to Jeremy's mom. And I think that goes a long way. Like Jeremy has not even divulged what happened to his mom to many people. So that just kind of proves like how far Dolls was willing to go to help out Jeremy and make sure that he's not alone in this kind of search. So yeah, I don't know. I think that Jeremy didn't think of it as a divide necessarily or like a loyalty thing. I think he just thought, I owe Dolls above all else. Like, and that's my relationship to Dolls always. Like I got his back because he's always had mine. And I don't know if he thought about the other things, the externalities.
I think that's a good point, and I'll add on to it because one of my moments was also in this sort of same area after Dolls dies in episode 303, when Winona is sort of blaming Jeremy for not telling her about him being sick, and she really just puts all her anger and guilt on him. And he kind of, he's like, I did this for Dolls. And there's a moment when they're at the gravesite and Winona puts her arm around Jeremy. And that's the moment for me where I think it's like her way of apologizing and accepting the fact that Dolls is the one that trusted Jeremy with this secret. And so if Dolls could trust Jeremy with the secret, then maybe she should be a little less hard on him for, being the one to keep the secret as well. And so I really love that moment where Winona sort of just gives in to her hardness, where she kind of like separates herself from people. I mean, she wanted to blame somebody and Jeremy just happened to be the one there. I mean, you can tell that she didn't actually think that it was Jeremy's fault that this happened, but he was the guy that took the fall for it, But I love the moment where she sort of puts her arm around him at the gravesite, because it's just like reassurance that like he is a part of this team, and she's slowly learning that like you said, Varun, if my people, my friends can trust him, then I can too.
So what else do you have, Varun?
I had I guess I mentioned, trivia night I had.
Okay.
Love trivia night.
Yeah, I love trivia night because it was just one of the funnest episodes as a cast we've ever filmed. Also, it was like kind of the culmination of Dom and I's kind of friendship and Waverly and Jeremy. It was just like, it was a really special moment filming all of 4B, really. Because we had in the back of mind, this might be the end, And so we always played with that kind of level of gratitude and fun. We're like, okay, let's have as much fun as possible. So Dom and I would just crack each other up with half the things we were doing. I mean, we also were confused how this spell worked, like no one really explained it to us. So we were figuring it out. We're like, okay, do we just yell things at each other? Like, how mean do we get? And so it just like brought out a new side of the Jeremy Waverly dynamic that I really loved, because I love their best friendship, because it's different than Nicole and Winona's best friendship, like we found our own kind of quirky, nerdy friendship that's unique to ourselves that we got to really explore in that kind of episode. And I think it was just a beautiful arc of like how close they've become and how much of buddies they really are, but also that their competitive streak exists and they're similar in many ways that I'd love to think that continues after the series has ended. Like in their own extended universe, these two are still competing on some level of who the smartest is.
I loved that episode mostly because it took me a little while as a viewer to realize that Jeremy and Waverly were under the spell, because like they're both such competitive and like nerdy in the way that like of course they would be fans of trivia night, like Jeremy and Waverly, of course they would. But then I was like, wait, they're a little more competitive than usual. And then it took a minute for me to realize that they were under the spell, which made it all that greater to know that the reason they were being so competitive and going up against each other was because of the spell, even though that's sort of how they are. And they probably would have really loved trivia night without the spell. The spell just made it, so much greater.
One of my favorite lines is when Jeremy disses Waverly and he's just like, oh yeah, online degree. And she's like, I will crush you.
I know. We even felt uncomfortable as actors doing them. Like, this is the spell, right? Because we didn't even know, what does the spell do? It wasn't so non-specific to us that, well, I'm glad it made sense to everybody in the end. I think like a lot of it is explained through how Kuru acts.
Yeah.
Like he's nuts. So it's like, okay, we kind of have free reign to we have leeway to how the spell works and what's going on, because that guy's a maniac. So who knows what kind of wish he made, like how specific it was.
Did you get to keep the hat, the trivia night hat prize?
No,
Oh.
I thank God that thing just kept falling off. It's so big. I just remember like so many moments in that episode, we found a lot of comedy, because when we get those kind of episodes, it just like, we're like, let's mine every beat. Like I remember when Mel was grabbing my face, and like that wasn't in the script, but she kept mushing my face every time, and we just would die laughing, and we'd have to redo the take like constantly. Everyone in the crew is like couldn't stop laughing either. Like there's just so many moments of that where we're like, okay, how do we make this even funnier and more ridiculous? Like in the jail cell, Mel's grabbing me and I'm like, oh God, stop touching me. You know, like there's just so many fun things in there that, just make me laugh every time.
Who would win in a trivia contest between the cast members?
Oh, I don't know.
I mean, I guess everybody has their strengths. So some,
Yeah.
A category that you probably all can know about, like Canadian history or something. I don't know.
I think trivia would be Dom's worst nightmare, because she struggles to remember pop culture. But I think Tim would be really good. I think I'd be pretty good too. Yeah, I think Tim and myself would be pretty good at it. He knows a lot of random things, and so do I.
Maybe at a convention in the future, there will be a trivia, event where you guys can put your knowledge to the test.
I think we got to do it. An homage to trivia night.
Yeah.
I think that would be such a fun event at a con.
Well, I'll put in a good word for Earpapalooza.
Ooh, okay. Good job. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I want to go back to 212. I know we briefly talked about it, but my moment from 212 is actually with Jeremy and Nicole, and they're in the sheriff office or BBD headquarters at the time. And they're brainstorming where Clutie's tomb would be. He's in science mode. He's doing the map and measuring the distance from one place to the other. He's really in the zone. And Nicole asks Jeremy, why did you stay after BBD dissolved? Why did you stay in purgatory? And he said, I stayed because I don't fit in here, but none of you asked me to. And he said, I'm allowed to be me. And that line has sort of become a fandom favorite because of its hidden meaning, really. It's in the fandom, we all stay here because we don't belong either, but no one asked us to. The show was kind of made for everyone. And I said this on a different podcast. I believe it was probably our finale recap where I said, the show is not for everyone, but it is for anyone. So it's kind of like none of us really have a place. We're just all here because everyone accepts us as we are, and we don't have to be anything else. So what do you think about that line, Varun? And what do you think it was so easy for Jeremy to find his place there and his place with the Earps?
I think it's a group of misfits, what is it? Posse of dipshits.
Dipshits, yeah.
Yeah. It is this kind of a eclectic group of very different personalities that somehow work as friends, because I think they're all vulnerable and open-hearted, and maybe that's all that's really required. And so maybe for Jeremy, that was that kind of realization of like, oh, all I need for friends is not to be similar to them. I just need to be honest with them, and then hope that they're honest with me too, like put myself out there. And so in that, I think that, him fitting in is like, I'm being myself and you still love me by me being myself, which is amazing and rare.
Did you feel like the gravitas of that line when you read it or even saying it, or was it just a line for you?
No, I guess it like many things, it's just a line for me. I think I understood its metatextual kind of aspect, because Jeremy gets a lot of those where he's referring to something in the fandom or the show. Yeah. Like I remember that one time when Winona says like, we don't have it in the budget, and then in the back I'm like, there's no budget.
Yeah,
like that's us making fun of the show, like there's all these things. So I'm like, I think I understand it, but I also didn't understand the full impact of Earpers, because I hadn't gone to a convention or seen the effect that it has on social media yet. And so, I kind of said it at the time as Jeremy saying it. And then upon hindsight, it's just, it's more meaningful and impactful.
I think it fit really well with that character of Jeremy too, just because of how his origin sort of came about. it probably resonates with everyone. Nicole probably feels the same way. You know, she stayed in purgatory for her own reasons. But I love that it was Jeremy that said that, because his origin story was like he was just a guy in a lab and somehow he ended up in purgatory with this crazy group of people. And, you know, he stayed because he was allowed to be himself.
Yeah, I mean, they get to have fun together. They have a community. Doc's like final line to Winona, like life is they say life is short but it's long and lonely, like that. I think is how Jeremy felt for a long time in Black Badge, holed up in a basement till he finds these bright people who accept him for who he is. He's like, okay, I'll go on your crazy adventures. I might not understand it, but at least we're together.
So one of my last moments is from 45406. We don't see it, but there's an unspoken connection between Nicole and Jeremy. And they were kind of on the outs for the majority of season 4 or season 4A when he showed back up in purgatory. But she knew that he was the only one that she could count on to essentially kill her, to get rid of the possession that was taking over her body. So what was that like, to kind of be the person to take this on? Probably we're gonna get a few dirty looks in from the fans, that's for sure. But then there was that moment at the end of 405 where you look straight into the camera, presumably at Waverly, and you say, you have to trust us. And I read something earlier on Twitter where the person said, because I believe 405 was airing tonight in the UK. And the person was like, what other show can they do that to the queer character? And the audience is like, yep, we are trusting them to not kill the queer character off or not do that. Again, that's another, like you said, it's another like meta thing on Jeremy to just be like, I'm the one that's doing this, but you have to trust me. Like, don't hate me. So what was that like? What was that filming that like? What was just that whole process?
Well, the frogs are wonderful and they got lost for an hour and we had to shut down the set. But no, I think like I wonder why Jeremy never really reached out to Nicole, and I had those questions. But as Emily explained it to me, he was always being watched. He didn't want to implicate his friends. It's why he changed Winona's name to Winona Earp on the sheet in case, like these things. He was silently watching and he was aware, like, okay, she's safe. Okay, that's fine. That's all I need to know. Like, I don't want to dig too much in case people spy on me. And so when it came to Nicole being mad at him, it was hard to play like being mad back at Nicole, knowing that she was kind of upset. But at the same time, she doesn't know what I've been through. Like we both don't really know our internal struggle during those 18 months. We know what we're missing, but we don't know like how painful both of us have it. And so, yeah, it was a complicated kind of journey to bring Nicole and Jeremy back together. And I think that's just such a wonderful thing of like creating conflicts amongst their friendships and then trying to heal them and then bringing them to a deeper place. So it was really fun and beautiful to do those scenes with Kat, because at least it added a layer of something that was necessary and needed to be reckoned with. Because what happened to these people in the 18 months off? Like how did they all survive? Like their lives became way more complicated than the people in the garden because they had more time to deal with all these complications. And as to the last scene, when I go up to Waverly, that was just like Emily's honest understanding that we can't do the fans wrong. Like we understand the tropes. We know that it's hard to trust media with LGBT representation. That it's like, okay, let's just talk to the camera and tell them, like, this is Winona Earp. We can break the fourth wall. It's irrelevant, And so doing that scene was just like, yeah, let's go full on and talk to our fans, because this is the 4th season. What are they going to tell us now?
I think that's the only time throughout the series where anyone looks into camera, obviously. And I know it wasn't like the whole it wasn't like The Office where they like, make the full fourth wall, but it was such a great non-break, but sort of breaking the fourth wall, which I loved because it wasn't like a full-on like let's talk to the viewer. It was kind of like this. They made you believe that he was talking to Waverly, but then they did it in a way where you knew that it was actually the writing speaking to us. And I just loved the way that it was done. It was kind of like this middle ground where it was like breaking the wall, but not really breaking it.
Yeah, I think so. And it just made for a really good, it's just for dramatic effect for a mid-season finale. It was wonderful. Those 2 episodes were so wonderful to film, mainly because we shot all the bathtub stuff within a week, in the same location. So Kat was in there like 8 to 12 hours a day with the hot water, losing her mind. And then Greg has his hat on, and then I'm just sitting there like doing a monologue every time because I had to do both scenes from like the 5th episode to the 6th episode we shot simultaneously. So I like had so much that we had to do, but it was crazy and chaotic and so fun. Like we all became so loopy at the end because we had to take stock of like, this is the weirdest show ever. Like, cause we're just doing Groundhog Day over and over, the scene, different angles. And it just made us appreciate it all the more. And it just deepened the performances too, because it was just so ridiculous and so fun. The frogs, I don't know. It was just such a fun 2 episodes. Definitely one of my fondest memories is doing those 2 episodes.
So Allison, do you have any other?
Well, I have one honorable mention because I've gone through my top 5.
Yeah, I've got. What about you, Varun? I think you got one more.
Yeah, I just got one more now. It's just the scene when Jeremy confesses to Winona about what happened to Robin, and we find out the kind of that whole episode as it unravels that Jeremy's been holding that dark secret about Robin. And that's definitely my top moment for him.
Robin 2.0.
Robin 2.0.
What was that like? Did they tell you ahead of time that Justin was unavailable and they were going to be recasting for this, role, and then this is kind of how it was going to play out, and they were going to rip his face off?
It was tough. It was like pretty last minute because they just couldn't work with the Newfoundland government to quarantine Justin after flying, because they have pretty strict quarantine laws in the East Coast because they had no COVID there. And so he was filming his show as a series regular. He would come for one day and then have to quarantine for 14 days and miss his other show. So after like trying to figure it out for the longest time, they just had to scrap the idea. And because it's already written, you can't rewrite a whole script, like all the locations are booked, everything is there. So we got another actor to play him, and luckily Justin and Jim were friends. And so they got to understand each other's mannerisms a bit. And I think Jim did a really good job of trying to embody Justin in the craziest way. But at the end of the day, it was the first moment when I read a script of like, oh, I just feel bad for this guy. Like I understood a new level of acting, to be honest, of like, I just feel empathy and such sadness for a person who has to go through losing someone they love. Like, and then feeling the guilt and responsibility for being the reason that they lost them. Like it really resonated with me, that storyline. And that scene I got to do with Winona was maybe one of my favorite acting moments I've ever done, because it was just like raw. It was real, even in the most ridiculous circumstance ever. And it added a layer to Jeremy that I always was craving, of like complexity. And, I think he's lost his mom. And in my head of doing that scene, it's like, oh, this is another person I'm responsible for killing, quote unquote, or for their life ending.
Do you think maybe Jeremy was jealous that Waverly came back to Nicole, and that might have also been why he was standoffish with her earlier on?
I don't know if he was jealous of that. I don't think he gave it. No, I don't think he has the capacity for that, to be honest. Like, I think it was more, it just took a toll on him and aged him a lot, because he had to see Robin every day and then see that he never recognizes him. It's like being around an ex that refuses to acknowledge your existence. And for like, it's I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it would make you a happier person.
Yeah. The weight of that whole scenario really got me the most, because I mean, you see it when, of course, like when Jeremy goes into this room and you see new Robin. I honestly at first was like, oh, Justin looks different, because it took me so long to realize it was him, because you're right. He did embody the mannerisms of like Justin. And so they did a really good job with that. But then like you finally realize what happened, and it's like, oh, this is very sad. But the moment that got me the most was when Jeremy tells Winona, and they walk up and Jeremy's like, you remember Robin? And she's like, I thought I did. And they sit down, and the rawness that Jeremy has to once again relive this, because he's probably been dealing with it himself this whole time. He's been going to these meetings, giving him this serum to hopefully jog his memory. He's been dealing with it every day. And now he has to sit down and relive it all over again while he tells Winona. And that's when it really got me. It's the weight of it. It's like, he's been dealing with this on his own for so long. So to see him finally lean on Winona, which I think was just a great kind of exclamation point on their journey as friends, because how Winona and Jeremy started as friends and how they ended up, him feeling comfortable telling her all about what happened. I think it's just a great way to kind of end their story. And I mean, that moment, I clapped for you, because I thought the acting in that was phenomenal. So wonderful job on that. It was just so raw, and you could just feel the emotions like when I was watching it, and it was just like, it was so great.
That was definitely a top moment in that episode of ours.
Yeah, when we did that episode chat, it was one of our top moments.
Yeah. So Allison, what was that honorable mention of yours?
Okay, so my honorable mention is Jeremy's infatuation with Doc.
Oh,
because
sure,
it's
yeah.
kind of like a theme throughout, so you can't really pick a specific moment. It's just like when he first enters the team, he immediately, talks about Doc, and I think he's the one that's like telling Doc he can help him learn how to use his cell phone and like all this stuff. And it's just like Jeremy finds any way he can to sort of like insert himself into Doc's life. And then you've got the whole mustache thing, which no one ever knows why Jeremy grew a mustache, but we could just pretend that it's because he loves Doc's mustache so much. And there's the moment where Doc puts the hat on Jeremy's head, and he's just like bliss. He got the Doc holiday hat, and he's just so excited. And I know that you and Tim have such a great friendship, and it definitely plays off on screen really well to see you guys as Jeremy and Doc kind of have those moments together. So I just really loved all of them.
Yeah, it's great. It's surprising how few scenes we actually have together, but every time we try to make them stand out, And one of my favorite scenes with him in that Doc Jeremy relationship was when Doc was explaining or Jeremy was confessing that he got ghosted and he feels like angry and upset about it, and the Doc consoles him. And I just like remember we came up with this bit that I don't know why we're so proud of it, but like I put my hand on his knee and he puts his hand back on mine. And we're just like, oh my God, this is like, every time we have a scene, we try and find the littlest moments to get out of it. Like even the scene in the jail cell, like was written very different when I'm trying to calm Doc down from eating Danny. It was more like, oh my God, it was still in that vein of like yelling and pushing it back, blah, blah. But our director, Paolo, was like, no, let's just like make them intimate. Like, let's give them a vulnerable moment in their friendship finally. It's like, oh my God, yes, of course. Like these two men have experienced so much. And like at this point, they've reached like their brothers that, yeah, like I want them to like cry for each other because they care about each other so much. So it's like we got to span the crush, the crush has expanded, it changed, it transformed to like a genuine admiration.
Friendship,
yeah.
The trajectory, I can't say that word, of that kind of crush really did come full circle. And my honorable mention is how Jeremy became Jeremy Interruptus this season with the way hot moments in the barn, in the BBD office when they kept the couch, for science, I guess. But yeah,
this is all karma for Nicole Interruptus. Like this is all the karma. They deserve it. Nicole has interrupted too many Doc Winona moments.
Nicole has interrupted too many Doc Winona moments. What are you talking about? Winona keeps a couple.
No, remember when Nicole went to when Doc was when they were getting the bullets in the basement? I remember Nicole runs down there.
I think she
forgot there was-
purposefully like stomped down the stairs so that she could just like pay them back for all the times that they interrupted.
Everyone's interrupting everyone.
Yeah.
Wayhawk gets the most interruptions, sadly.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you wouldn't mind, just a couple other just random questions, Varun.
Sure.
Who do you wish you worked with more?
I definitely wanted more scenes with Tim. You know, I think we had a couple moments here and there a season, but yeah, I would have loved to act with him way more.
I've got one. So you've been to a few cons now, and I want to know, is there a specific moment that you remember often or a moment that stands out in your experience at conventions?
Man, I remember this video. I think they made a video. Was it at Palooza? I believe it was so impactful. Like it was such a large cast of that one that we were all sitting there watching. It's like those kind of moments where you're sharing it with such a large audience. Like I think my favorite moments have always been when we get to watch it with the audience. Like it's so entertaining and it takes on its own meaning. So when we watch that compilation of the history of the show, it's like, oh my God, everyone, the Earpers and the actors have spanned this crazy journey together. And look what we've all been through and survived.
Yeah, I like the theme, like you mentioned earlier about being able to watch the show at Comic-Con when you got to sit with a bunch of Earpers. And I think that every time I've spoken to a cast member at a con or whatever, a lot of them have always said the same. Like watching the show with fans just kind of brings a different energy because like you guys film it out in Calgary and like you do the thing, but like it's hard to see the reactions unless you're like, I mean, you live tweet and you read the tweets, but being in a room, it's got to be more fulfilling to see your work play out that way, instead of just reading tweets that say great job, so I can imagine the times that you've been able to watch the shows live and to do the experiences at cons where you get the face to face, like that's got to be really great as an actor to kind of get a little bit of encouragement, I guess, to know like, okay, well, what we did film out there in Calgary actually made sense. And I remember Emily saying back in season 1 when they filmed, the show didn't air until they were done. And she was like, I honestly thought at some point we were just out there pretending because it didn't feel real. Like, is anybody even going to like this? And so being able to actually see reactions at cons and stuff has got to be great as an actor.
Oh my God. Yeah. I mean, that's it's not watching us again on the show. It's watching the audience. It's like, that's why we love reaction videos, except you get the best reaction video from Earpers, it's because it's meaningful. Like it's so, yeah, it just takes on a different thing. Like I wish we could just turn the camera around on the audience during those moments. That's what I want to see. That's what it's like everyone's taking photos of us, but I'm like, I want to take photos of everyone out there. It's crazy to me. It's surreal what a crazy thing exists and what a journey we've been on. Like, I do feel like maybe, 10 years from now we reunite and it's still the same people that'll all come together. We make a movie and then, we all get to see each other all over again. It would be fun with the Earpers and the actors. I mean,
the Earpers will be in the movie.
Yes, of course. Totally.
So if I could, it'll be Way Hot renewing their vows, and we'll all be sitting in the audience. To that point, can I just ask you about 412, the wedding? Now, way back when Way Hot had their first proposal, Jeremy pegged himself the Bay of Honor. However, in the actual wedding ceremony, he officiated. So when you read the script and saw that, now is that what the kids call a glow up for you, that you weren't just the Bay of Honor, you were the officiant? How did you, when you read that, were you surprised by it, or were you like, oh yeah, this is pretty much what he would do?
Yeah, I think also the symbolic gesture of like Doc being the best man, like he's been on such a dark journey that it's like, yeah, he's become the best. Like he's his best version of himself as a man, that he is. And so I was like, okay, I'm not super mad at that. Also, I was really happy that I got such a large speech at the Way Hot wedding. It's iconic, like I get to be part of something that's so, to me, groundbreaking and beautiful. And also, I don't know, I've never seen a wedding that's more perfect. I used to film weddings. and getting to like be part of a wedding like that in the behind the scenes context is just like, yeah, it's beyond special. And it was impactful that Jeremy got to be the officiant. Like, I think it's a better outcome than the Bay of Honor. Bay of Honor doesn't get to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he gave a great speech.
Yeah. Well, and another point from that episode was the phone call that Jeremy got to become director of the Black Badge Division. We all know now that Emily was on the other end of that call as the cameo voice. Did you know that she was the one that was going to have the voice on the other end? Number one. Number two, was she on set and feeding you those lines? Because usually it's like the script supervisor or something like that does like another end of the phone call. But was she on set? Was she doing the off-camera lines to you? Like, what was, did you know it was going to be her?
No, I had no idea. I mean, for years we've been pushing Emily to do a cameo, and lo and behold, she does this cameo on as a voice. Like, because I know she does not like to be in front of the camera or act or any of those things. So I was just so happy that she's the one gifting me. I'd like to think it's some sort of meta, you know, like Emily Andress is telling Jeremy's character he gets this job. Like, it's not a character telling Jeremy. It's the creator of our show is telling him.
Yeah. Do you have anything else, Allison? I have a couple more questions,
okay,
but
sure.
I don't want to commandeer this. But so as we said before, and you kind of mentioned it, but like Jeremy kind of stays inside. His whole thing was that he was usually like in the office doing research or anything like that. But there were certain points where he had to go outside, and you kind of mentioned you don't like the cold. So did you prefer to be in like the inside studio scenes, but that kind of made you miss out on a couple of things that maybe shot, you know, outside? And did you want to be a part of any scene or anything like that maybe you weren't? Like, for instance, in 407, you weren't in that episode at all with the Cupid. Like, would you have wanted
is there? Yeah, no, that's
would you have wanted Jeremy to finally get a slow dance with Doc?
Yeah, was there any moments in the show I wish I was a part of? You know what? I think the Cupid thing I would have loved to have been a part of. Like, it just looked hilarious. The dancing, the sprinkles, the theme of that episode was just so over the top of falling in love with each other. Yeah, there's moments that I want that don't exist, like body swapping. I would have loved an episode where we all swap bodies and got to act as each other. It's just a fun acting challenge. Or like the musical episode, as I wish that was a thing too. That would have been so challenging and just like hilarious, I think, complicated.
What do you think Jeremy would sing in a musical episode?
I hope he would rap.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you are a good rapper, aren't you?
I'm pretty good. But then also, he said it in episode 2. He wants to teach the baby to rap. So I'm like, okay, this guy probably raps in his spare time.
Or not like a love ballad to Doc. Or...
I don't know what that episode would be about. Maybe it's all in the body swapping thing too. I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's all I have for questions and top 5 moments. Did you like the moments that we chose for Jeremy, Varun?
Oh, I loved it. This has been a great podcast. I enjoyed it so much. Maybe it's like top 2 now, top 3.
Wow. Yeah, you made it into top 2.
Tell your friends that, you know, they got to come on here. So those are our top 5 moments for Jeremy. Do you guys agree? Do you disagree? Drop us some comments. Let us know what your top 5 moments are. Allison, where can they find us online?
You can find us at Earp Top 5 on Twitter or earptop5.com. So leave us a comment or reply to our tweets and just tell us your favorite Jeremy moments, because we would love to hear them.
And you can follow me at Laura Meet World.
And I am at Nona Weha. And Varun, if people don't already know, where can they find you at?
Yeah, just at Varun Saranga on Instagram and Twitter.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Varun, for joining our Top 5 podcast.
Thank you. A lot of fun. Bye, guys.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye.